I gave her $105 million, a Tesla, and a mansion, but my daughter said, "Why so little? I want more." She said it the way people order sparkling water, flat, thoughtless, as if the number had only one digit. The room went silent. Caterers froze, my attorney stopped mid-sip, and the nephew who'd been filming the moment for memories lowered his phone like it had scalded him. Ava stood in front of the 12-foot windows of the Bayview house, backlit by a clean winter sky, diamond earrings cold as ice. Pierce hovered half a step behind her, all polished teeth and cufflinks, a man who looked like he'd never lugged anything heavier than a golf bag. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. "Why so little?" she repeated, slower now, as if I might need help with the math. "You promised to make things right after Mom. 105 doesn't even cover the stress you put me through." The word promise did something to me. I put my hand on the mahogany banister to steady myself and felt every groove I'd carved there the day the house was finished. I'd sanded until my wrists went numb because Margaret had liked the grain to look like water moving. I glanced at the lawyer. Woodruff gave me a small nod we'd rehearsed months ago. If there was a moment to end the performance and draw the curtain, this was it. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not on that word. "More," I said. "What would more look like, Ava?" She cocked her head, a gesture she'd learned from Instagram. Delicate, unbothered, security, real security. Not crumbs tied up in your weird conditions and lectures about responsibility. Full control. Liquid. She flicked her eyes toward Pierce. "And the Tesla is quaint. We'll need something decent for the lake place, too." I let the silence stretch. Woodruff shifted beside the grand piano and checked his watch. He knew what was already in motion. Ava didn't. "Take a breath," I said finally. "Join us in the study. We'll talk." "I'm done talking," she said, voice rising. "Either you hand it over, or we do what we should have done after Mom died." Pierce's hand tightened on her elbow, a warning too late. The room absorbed the sentence and tilted. Caterers found reasons to be elsewhere. "After Mom died," I repeated. "Right. I'm 68. I still wake at 5. Coffee black, 2 slices of Margaret's rye recipe I never got right. I spent 40 years in concrete and steel, bridges, hospitals, the kind of work that sits where you put it and doesn't care about fashion. My daughter grew up in back seats with coloring books while I met inspectors. She danced in gymnasiums that smelled like varnish and sweat while I ran payroll on a folding chair. When she wanted private school, I made it happen. When she chose an arts college with tuition like a museum heist, I wrote the check. When she married Pierce, boyish grin, family office pedigree, I shook his hand and told him I was glad she'd found someone who adored her. For a while, I believed it. 3 weeks after Margaret's funeral, Pierce brought estate planners to my kitchen and called it a grief-friendly conversation. They sipped espresso and explained modernizing legacy structures, while my wife's lipstick still marked the rim of her favorite cup. I nodded, listened, asked them to leave, and didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called Woodruff, a man who had represented union electricians for 30 years and never wore anything with a logo on it. "I'll need a structure," I said. "Something that looks generous from across the street and keeps my family safe when you read the fine print." "Strings?" he asked. "Cables," I said. The Tesla wasn't a gift. It was a lease through my company, with an employee identification number assigned to household operations and a clause that revoked it upon derogatory conduct toward executive management. I was executive management. The mansion wasn't theirs. Maple Bridge LLC held title, and they had a revocable occupancy license tied to maintenance benchmarks they'd never meet because the benchmarks weren't about gutters or lawns. They were about respect. As for the $105 million, that number belonged to a holding company with non-voting units spread across 3 trusts. A GRAT for tax efficiency, a charitable remainder trust in Margaret's name, and a spendthrift trust with a behavioral covenant. If you rolled your eyes just now, I understand. It sounds like theater until you've sat at a kitchen table listening to a stranger explain how your grief makes you pliable. I built the structure for the day someone would try to bend me until I broke. I built it because Margaret once told me, "Be generous with money, not blind with it." Ava and Pierce had smiled wide the morning I transferred the house. We took a photo on the marble stairs. Pierce posted it, grateful for family and new chapters, and tagged brands he wanted to gift him monogrammed blankets. The Tesla went into the garage like a sleek white pet. The $105 million got a press release because Pierce insisted wealth behaves better when people can see it. I agreed because people who can see it also record it, and I recorded everything. That first Sunday brunch at Bayview after the transfer, Ava pushed back from the table, wiped hollandaise from her lip with a napkin, and said, "You'll still take care of the taxes, right? And the staff? We shouldn't have to absorb your overhead just because you got sentimental." I was sentimental, so I smiled and said, "Of course." That night, Woodruff filed a UCC-1 lien against Maple Bridge on behalf of Margaret's Garden Foundation for services previously rendered, and perfected it within 48 hours. The staff at Bayview became employees of the foundation, not the house. QuickBooks is a dictionary. You just have to know where to look up the words. 2 months later, I staged something I'm not proud of. A health scare. Tightness in the chest, a steadying hand on the doorframe as I shuffled into the kitchen. Ava's eyes flicked to the clock. Pierce said the word paramedics like it tasted expensive. He helped me sit down and then stepped out on the terrace to make a call that lasted 6 minutes and 12 seconds. On the recording later, I heard him tell someone named C.E. that the timeline might accelerate if the old man declines gracefully. "The old man," I repeated when the file finished playing. I turned off my office lamp and looked at the wall of photographs. Ava on my shoulders at 7. Margaret in a linen dress by the truck bed full of hydrangeas. The Bayview staircase in frame but incidental. It always had been. I recovered. I took it slowly. I let Pierce and Ava grow used to a world where the house was theirs and I was helpful. Then I planned my own acceleration. The party at Bayview was supposed to be a ribbon cutting for the gallery. Ava dreamed up a social impact space to elevate female voices. I wrote the check and kept my eyebrows where they belonged. The guest list was 200 names long and heavy with people who looked good in photo booths. I arrived early with Woodruff. We set up in the study, 2 leather chairs, a banker's lamp, and a screen on the wall. At 7, a woman with sleeve tattoos and extravagant shoes handed me sparkling water and asked if I preferred cucumber or lemon. I picked cucumber and took my time walking the long hall, reading the labels beneath the framed pieces. Empowerment through narrative, grief as lineage, the labor of fatherhood. Ava had curated the words with care. She always was good with words. At 7:10, Pierce cut the ribbon and flashed a smile so photogenic it could monetize. At 7:20, he made the toast, thanked me for investing in dreams, and nodded toward the piano where a violinist started a restless, pretty piece. At 7:30, he took Ava's hand, and together they walked over. "Study?" he asked, as if it were his idea. I opened the heavy door and let them enter first. Woodruff stood. Pierce's smile faltered. "We'll keep this short," Woodruff said. "We know you're hosting." Ava leaned against a bookshelf like a queen evaluating petitioners. "What's going on?" I pressed a small brass button under the desk. The screen woke up and showed a section of my living room, a stack of bound documents, a sealed blue envelope, and my hand placing a photograph on top. On the photograph, I'm younger by 10 years, holding Ava at a Little League field while she points at a plane. Pierce blinked. "Is this performative, or—" "Paperwork," Woodruff said evenly. "Your occupancy agreement has milestones today. Clause 9, civility and respect, requires you to communicate concerns privately, refrain from disparagement, and maintain reasonable cooperation with the licensor." Pierce chuckled. We're talking about feelings now? In contracts? In conditions, Woodruff said. Ava crossed her arms. You can't evict us from our own home because you didn't like a tone. Maple Bridge still holds title, I said. You hold space. And the money? She snapped. You gave that with cameras rolling. I moved units with cameras rolling, I said. Vested by service to the foundation and the board's quarterly vote. Board being me, Margaret's sister Patricia, and the CFO I trust more than breath. Ava shook her head, annoyed, not afraid yet. God, you're exhausting. Emotional, Pierce murmured, tapping a note on his phone. He's choosing violence. I let it sit there because they needed to say it. Then I tapped the second brass button. The speakers clicked softly. Pierce's voice filled the room, lifted from the terrace call during my health scare, then from another made 2 weeks later when he was sure I wasn't around. Nothing flamboyant, no cartoon villainy, just the efficient language of a man building a plan. Conservatorship for a year if we can document forgetfulness. Speed a power of attorney through if he slips. It's not unethical to move forward if his judgment is compromised. Ava, sweetheart, you deserve security. Ava's face didn't move. Pierce's did. He stiffened, upper lip drawing back like he'd tasted something sour. You've been recording us. Only at my house, I said. And only after you brought estate planners to my kitchen before we'd taken Margaret's flowers from the mantel. Ava looked at me then, really looked, for the first time in months. A flicker, hurt, anger, memory, crossed her face and was gone. I'm still willing to talk, I said. The gallery, the staff, your projects. The car can stay in the garage if you prefer not to be photographed returning a gift. But you're not getting control. Not because I'm cruel. Because I promised your mother I'd protect you from anything that would ruin you, including sudden power you haven't learned how to hold. She rolled her eyes with a teenage precision I knew too well. Stop making this about Mom. All right, I said. Then we'll make it about terms. I nodded to Woodruff. He slid 2 documents across the desk. One rescinds the occupancy license effective 90 days from now. The other codifies a path forward, a smaller place, a stipend through the foundation, and a social impact budget that requires receipts. If you sign the second, the first is shredded. If you don't, the first is filed tonight. You can't be serious, Pierce said. We have 200 guests here. That's why the 90 days, I said. I'm trying not to humiliate you. Ava stared. For a second I thought she might say fine. Pierce placed his hand on her forearm, the practiced squeeze of a coach on a star player's elbow. Or, he said, we call your bluff in front of your donors and friends. We walk into that gallery and tell the truth, that your generosity is a cage, that your love comes with contracts. Let the internet decide who's cruel. He smiled again, white and endless. I tapped the third brass button. The screen changed to a live feed of the foyer. Guests milling, jackets on arms, faces turned toward something outside the frame. Over it, a calm female voice began to read, Maple Bridge, LLC. Notice of lien perfection. Pursuant to UCC. Article 9, the undersigned, Margaret's Garden Foundation, announces the perfection of a security interest in Maple Bridge, DBA Bayview House. The voice belonged to Emma, the foundation's CFO. She stood at the top of the stairs with a stack of printed notices. I'd asked her to time it exactly. She was precise to a fault. My donors, engineers, nurses, teachers I'd built with or built for, were clustered near the landing, reading. They weren't internet. They were people with calendars and taxes. They understood paper. I let Pierce watch his smile slide. Ava's phone began to buzz, texts lighting up the screen with blood-orange banners. She didn't move to answer. She just stared at me, eyes wide and injured. You did this, she whispered. You did this, I said quietly. When you decided more had to come without measure. When you turned grief into leverage. When you called me a promise like I was a bank. She flinched. The word we both heard was promise. I'm giving you one more, I said. A clean one. Sign the second document and we'll make the next chapter bearable. She let out a short, ugly laugh I didn't recognize. You think you get to write my chapters? I think you and I used to write them together, I said. And then we stopped. Pierce reached for the pen. Ava took his wrist without looking at him. No, she said. We're not signing anything. He yanked his hand back, surprise flashing into anger. Don't be emotional, he said. Get out, she told him. His mouth opened and closed. He looked at me, then at Woodruff, then at the door. We're married, he said foolishly. Not to me, she said. He left, but not far. Through the glass I could see him on the landing, smiling again, already crafting the version he'd sell, the one where he'd been blindsided. Ava didn't look at me. She stared at the pen like it was ticking. I wanted you to tell me I was safe, she said finally, voice flat. Not with money. With you. It landed where it should have months ago. I had built protections so strong they looked like a fortress, and then acted surprised when she felt trapped. You are, I said, even when I make a mess of how it looks. She didn't answer. She picked up the document, read, set it down. I can't sign while I'm angry. Good, I said. Let's walk. We left the study. On the stairs, donors were still reading. Some were murmuring. Emma caught my eye and gave a short nod. Notices served, timelines running, the machine alive. In the gallery, the music had stopped. People stood in loose clusters. Pierce was surrounded by sympathetic faces, people who liked their outrage tidy. He was saying something about abusive control, about conditions designed to humiliate. When he saw me, he lifted his glass. To family, he said, and the people who didn't understand anything cheered. I stepped up to the small platform they'd built for speeches. My knees aren't what they were, but they remember ladders. Friends, I said, thank you for coming to celebrate Ava's gallery. Thank you for funding the foundation's work. Most of you know me. I'm not good at choreography. So I'll be plain. I told them what the foundation would do next. Convert Bayview into a residency for caregivers and their children, 6 families at a time, 9 months each. I told them Margaret had spent the last year of her life sneaking casseroles to a neighbor with 2 jobs and 1 car and 3 kids. I told them the house was beautiful and should be used. I told them I had made all my money in places where people go to heal, and it had changed something in me. The room listened. Not everyone liked it, but they listened. Now, I said, we'll make a smaller home across town, close to the school Ava loves. We'll fund the gallery properly and hire a director who understands grants and shipping insurance and the difference between a dream and a budget. And yes, the Tesla can stay 3 more months because there's no good reason to make a spectacle of a car. Laughter broke where I wanted it to. Tension slipped. People started talking together instead of about each other. Pierce's face hardened. Someone asked a better question. What changed your mind about Bayview? I told them the truth. I remembered the last thing Margaret asked me to do. At Margaret's bedside, 3 in the morning, the kind of hour that forces honesty, we hadn't talked about money. We'd talked about our daughter's stubbornness and my habit of turning love into a plan. Margaret had smiled the small, tired smile of a woman who has loved me since we were 19 and said, give Ava enough to breathe, not enough to drown. And if someone ever tries to turn her into a transaction, embarrass them politely. I'm not a polite man by nature, but I try when someone I love asks me to. The applause at the end wasn't thunder. It was better, steady, human, people who understood they'd watched a boundary drawn without a public beheading. Ava stood near the back, arms at her sides, eyes fixed on nothing. When the crowd thinned, she walked past me without speaking, closed herself in the powder room, and didn't come out for 9 minutes. When she did, she went straight to the study, picked up the pen, and signed the second document. 3 months, she said. Then we move. 3 months, I agreed. And the stipend, she said, is not an allowance. It's a budget for a program you're running, I said. With reporting. Stop treating me like an intern, she snapped, but softer. Stop acting like one, I said, not soft. She smirked despite herself. Then she wiped at her eyes and said, I hate you. Okay, I said. She hugged me anyway. It was brief and stiff and smelled like her mother's perfume because she'd been to the closet where we kept the things we don't talk about. Pierce didn't come back to the study. He stayed on his platform and held court, watched by people who needed a bad guy easy enough to fit in a story they could tell on the drive home. By midnight, he was gone. The next morning at 8, Woodruff filed the agreed paperwork with the county, and the clock on Bayview started. At 9, Emma canceled the staff contracts at Bayview with severance and offers to interview for positions at the new residency. At 10:30, the Tesla's leasing company received an email that the primary driver would change to Foundation Logistics Team, with a reasonable carve-out for temporary household use. At noon, Pierce arrived at my old office, wheeled his chair close, and began a speech about public relations. You won last night, he said. Congratulations. Internet sentiment is mixed, but favoring the self-made old lion demographic. Is that a zoo exhibit? I asked. He ignored it. We can all save face here, but I need guarantees. You don't get to need anything from me, I said. He leaned forward, practiced concern parked in the corners of his mouth. I don't think you want me to show people what you really are, Ronald. Try my name again, I said. Don. There you go. Don, he said, smiling. I don't think you want me to show your donors the side of you that records his daughter without her consent. I told them last night, I said. Try another angle. He hesitated, then went for the shot he'd reserved for last. Ava's not just entitled, Don. She's reckless. That gallery will burn through money like kindling if someone doesn't hold the match. I'm offering you... Employment? I asked. As her keeper? Leadership, he said smoothly. Stability. I've seen this before. A charismatic visionary needs an operator. That's me. You're not an operator, I said. You're a mouth with a spreadsheet. He sat back, wounded theatrically. I've raised money for 3 startups. And you left when they asked who signed the checks to your cousin. Sit down. My voice surprised us both. He sat. I'm going to show you something, I said. Not to embarrass you. To invite you to make a choice while you still think you have one. I turned my monitor and played a cut of another recording. This one not from my house, but from a restaurant. It wasn't mine. It came from a woman named Celia, who'd waited tables there for 17 years, a place where Pierce took clients and talked too loud. She'd sent it to Emma after the party because she recognized my name and thought I should know where my money tried to go. In the audio, Pierce explained to a man with a tattoo of an anchor on his wrist exactly how a foundation credit card could pay for consulting dinners that were mostly cocktails and how a gallery could be a write-off for a travel habit. I paused the audio and let the silence do its work. Pierce's face didn't yellow or pale the way some men do when their picture changes. He simply adjusted. Everyone does that, he said. It's how influence moves. You don't get to move mine. He stared. When the smile returned, it was not for lighting. It was for bare teeth. You forget who writes the stories, Don. Not men like you. Not anymore. Good news, I said. I write checks to the people who write the stories I care about. They put names on wings in hospitals. He stood, realized it cut his height advantage in half because I hadn't stood, and sat again. We can settle this, he said. You put the house issue on pause. I steer Ava back. We make you look like the benevolent patriarch you want to be. No, I said. We can't settle this because we're not in a dispute. We're at a fork. You can take the path where your marriage ends this spring, you leave town, and you tell people you learned a lot. Or you can take the path where you try to fight me in public, and the IRS reads your cousin's checks. He didn't blink. He blinked after. I didn't commit fraud, he said, more to himself than to me. You committed vacancy, I said. The fraud was your smile. He stood for real this time and went to the door. Hand on the knob, he turned. You'll die alone, he said. Men like you always do. Men like me shovel concrete into a hole in February and go home and sleep, I said. You'll be warm. You'll be noisy. You'll still hear me when you close your eyes. When he was gone, I sat until the coffee cooled. Then I called Ava. I need a favor, I said when she picked up. Come to the new place with me. There's a meeting I want you to run. I'm busy, she said. I'm returning a gown. Bring it, I said. You'll like these people. She sighed. Fine. The new place was a brick school building with good bones and bad pipes, 4 blocks from the city library. The old lunchroom would become the gallery. The classrooms would become studio space and daycare. We walked through with the architect, a woman with ring-bound curls and an accordion folder full of drawings. The smell of old varnish and wet plaster made me unreasonably happy. At 11:30, 8 women arrived. Nurses, a bus driver, a line cook, an aide who lifted people for a living, all with children. All with stories that look like the part of the city most donors don't drive through except in December with hot chocolate. They were the first cohort of residents. If we got the permits in time and the construction didn't discover something ugly in the walls. They sat at a folding table under the chalkboard and introduced themselves one by one. Ava shook their hands. She said the right words. Then the meeting started. They didn't want empowerment speeches. They wanted a washer and a dryer that didn't require quarters. They wanted a lock that worked and a door they could fix themselves. They wanted to know who paid the electric and how to use the thermostat. They wanted the studio to be open after bedtime, because bedtime is when you can finally breathe. Ava asked questions. She took notes in markers that bled a little on the cardstock. When she said, "We can do that," she said it like a woman who now understood that "we" had to be a spreadsheet as well as a heart. When the meeting ended, the bus driver stayed behind. Your wife used to sit on my bus stop when she couldn't sleep after chemo, she told me. I'd see her at 2 a.m. with a scarf on, making lists. Of course she did, I said. She'd like this, the woman said, looking at the chalkboard. Even the smell. She would, I said. On the drive back, Ava broke first. I hate Pierce, she said. Not a dramatic hate. Dry, tired. I know, I said. I also hate you, she added reflexively, but there was no heat in it. I know, I said again. You made me beg, she said. I heard why so little, and forgot every good thing, I said. That one sentence cost me more sleep than bankruptcy did. She swallowed. I didn't mean it. You meant it then? I said. That's enough for a paper cut that won't heal. She rolled down her window. February air needled our faces. You put our lives on rails without asking. And you tried to take off the brakes without learning the road, I said. We let the wind fill the space where an apology might have gone. Did you record me again in the study after I said I hate you? She asked eventually. No, I said. I remembered I loved you. Don't start, she muttered. You're going to make me cry, and I'm wearing expensive mascara. Should have gone with the good stuff, I said. She laughed despite herself. It sounded like when she was 9 and I built her the treehouse that tilted a little to the east because the old maple wouldn't tolerate a straight line. She'd love that tilt like a secret. Pierce didn't go quietly. He hired a PR firm that specializes in interventions with rich parents. They crafted threads and pseudonymous posts about controlling fathers and the abuse of philanthropy theater. He scheduled a podcast interview and told the host I'd weaponized grief. The host nodded into the mic with the grim authority of a man who makes his living hating gravestones. Woodruff advised me to ignore most of it, and I did. We focused on permits. Emma wrangled the city like a mother cat. The architect found asbestos that wasn't where it should have been. We pivoted a daycare room into a studio and moved the daycare to the bright corner. The first washer and dryer arrived and broke the same day. The second set arrived 2 days later and purred like a cat with a secret. In early March, the Charitable Remainder Trust finalized the sale of a small equity position I'd held for too long, and the check that landed in the foundation's account made even Emma blink. We named the new gallery after Margaret and put no plaque about the donor anywhere in it. Ava decided the first show would be called Work You Can Touch. She banned price lists on the wall and built a binder with printouts and QR codes because she wanted a way for a boy from down the block to buy a print without being looked at. The day the sign went up, Pierce's podcast dropped. He was good. I'd forgotten he could be good. He told a story that made me flinch, a story about a father who gives with one hand and takes with the other, a man who builds big and leaves small, who never learned to speak softness without turning it into rules. He mangled facts. He polished suspected motives until they glinted. And then, like a man who thinks luck is loyalty, he said something he shouldn't have. He bragged. Of course I knew how to navigate the system, he told the host, laughter easy. You think nonprofits don't comp dinners and trips? It's all legal if you know what bucket to put it in. I mean, the foundation card practically writes itself, right? The host hummed. The editor left it in. Maybe he wasn't paid enough to care. Emma sent the clip to the city's auditor along with Celia's recording and a packet of Pierce's filings we'd collected long before the party. We didn't need a raid. We needed a letter on letterhead. It came in a week later addressed to Pierce, the podcast host, and 3 brands that had sponsored episodes. It was calm and lawyerly and concluded with a sentence about apparent misuse of restricted funds in the context of public solicitations. Pierce's PR firm pivoted again, this time to something like penitence. He posted a video in a hoodie. He looked smaller in it, flatter. He said the word accountability and didn't say Ava's name. He said mine. He used a clip of me on the hospital groundbreaking in 1999, shovel in hand, and it made him look mean. The comments did the rest of the work, not because they were righteous, but because they were bored. The internet always leaves eventually. When the letter about the lean perfection hit the civil docket, a reporter with the Business Journal called Emma. She gave him one quote. A good house is more than photos. The story ran on page 4. It had a picture of me and Ava in hard hats looking at pipes. Pierce wasn't in it. He sent a text that night. You'll regret this. A minute later he sent another. She'll blame you forever. I typed and deleted 3 answers. Then I sent, learn to build something. He replied, I know how to build narratives. I put my phone face down on the kitchen table and finished washing a plate that didn't need washing. The house, Bayview, turned. The foundation accepted applications. The first group of caregivers walked through the front door with their kids, eyes wide and tired and wary. The Tesla backed out of the garage one last time with the foundation logo on a magnet strip along the door, and then it started carrying paint and diapers and 3 folding chairs to the school building. 90 days after the party, Ava and I watched movers load boxes into a rental truck bound for the new place, a brick townhouse with a yard the size of a prayer. A neighbor waved. Someone's radio played an old song from the year Margaret and I married. Ava took a deep breath and rolled her neck like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't know how to put down until now. This feels like punishment, she said. It's a correction, I said. She smiled without looking at me. Always an engineer. Gravity doesn't care about feelings, I said. Neither do mortgage clauses. Is Mom's bowl coming? She asked. It stays at Bayview, I said. Kitchen rules. Those kids need to stir something sacred. She nodded. We stood with our hands in our pockets and watched a stranger carry her wedding dress in a garment bag with a rip in the corner. The dress had cost as much as a small car. The bag made it look like laundry. "Are you going to her show?" Ava asked, eyeing the flyer a teenage volunteer had taped crooked on the new gallery door. "Who?" I asked. "The girl you met, the line cook, the one who draws women with their eyes closed." "I'll be there," I said. "You'll stand in the back," she said. "You always do that." "I like exits," I said. She turned toward me, expression shifting. "Do you think I wanted more because I was greedy, or because I was scared?" "Both," I said. "It's the same face with different lighting." She nodded slowly, absorbing that, then said, "I'm going to do this without Pierce." "I know," I said. "He'll say you broke us," she said. "He said that already," I said. We didn't talk about lawyers. Hers called mine and said words like separation and reconciliation and inventory. My attorney sent back a list of things I wouldn't say on the stand if they kept my family out of the transcript. Pierce wanted to salvage an audience, not a marriage. Ava wanted to salvage a life. The difference showed. One afternoon in June, I found her in the gallery alone, barefoot on the cool concrete, finishing the wall text for Work You Can Touch. The words were simple, unpretentious. They named materials and hours. They named who had babysat for whom so a woman could finish a canvas. They named who brought food. "You're doing it," I said. "I'm working," she said. "That too," I said. She didn't look up. "You're really not giving Bayview back." "No," I said. "Good," she said, and then, after a long minute, "Can the residency keep Mom's bowl forever?" "Yes," I said. "That's the only forever we're good at." The last piece of the plan was ugly and necessary. It wasn't revenge. It was a fence. You don't build a garden without one if you've ever had rabbits. Emma drafted the language, Woodruff bled the jargon out, and I signed the documents in the foundation office with the blinds half open to catch afternoon light. In plainer English, we created a permanent endowment for the residency. It owned the house outright, clear of liens because our lien had done its job and then gone quiet, like a string you pluck and let vibrate until it goes back to being a string. The endowment carried a clause I haven't read anywhere else but belongs everywhere, a Margaret rule. If any officer of the foundation attempted to use the house for personal status, brand growth, or self-promotion without measurable benefit to the residents, the house reverted to the city at $1 with the deed restriction that it remain a residency in perpetuity. It meant we could lose what we loved if we forgot who it was for. I slept better with that risk than with the mirror of the old kind of loss. The other piece was private. I took a file from my safe, a folder with a photo from that Little League field, the one of me with Ava on my shoulders, fingers sticky with orange slices. I wrote a letter and sealed it with blue wax because sentimentality is cheaper than diamonds and twice as permanent if you do it right. A week later, I met Pierce at a coffee shop he still thought was secret, because the barista smiled at him. I handed him a different envelope, white, unsentimental, containing a photocopy of a police report I hadn't filed, and a list of dates and places that would ruin him if I had to use them. He read the top page and grinned without humor. "You won," he said. "Not yet," I said. "Winning would be you learning something that makes you useful to the next person you love." He folded the paper. "You should write speeches." "I pour footings," I said. He stood up to leave, paused, and said, "I really did love her." "Then you didn't love me," I said. He frowned. "Why would I?" "Because you love people by loving the people they love," I said. "It's the only way to not make a circle out of yourself." He left with a shrug. Maybe he understood. Maybe he'll understand in 20 years when he's the one holding a pen in a room that smells like lemon oil and grief. On September 1st, the gallery opened its first show. I wore a suit that fit like it used to, not because I was thinner, but because the tailor cared about old men. The room was full of faces I wanted to hug and a few I wanted to avoid. Margaret's bowl sat on a pedestal with a card Ava had written in her careful print. For stirring batter with small hands. Ava stepped onto the platform built from 2 wooden pallets and a rug. She wore flats and no diamonds. She thanked the people who had made the show happen and didn't mention money until the 3rd paragraph because she had learned that money works best when it comes after gratitude, not before. Midway through, she stopped and looked at me the way she used to when she was 8 and had climbed too high. "Dad," she said, voice steady and unvarnished, "when Mom died, I wanted more of everything that didn't fix anything. I said ugly things. You answered with steel and paper. That saved me from a version of myself I would have hated." People shifted, uncomfortable. Honesty always sits wrong for a second. She continued, "Tonight, this room is my apology and my promise. We're going to build something here that doesn't depend on anyone's temper." She stepped down. People clapped. The bus driver hugged her hard enough to fold a crease in her program. A kid with hair dyed green bought a print for $20 and grinned like he'd been given the keys to a car. An hour into the evening, a woman I didn't know cleared her throat near the snack table. "Mr. Alder?" she asked. "That's me," I said. "I was at Bayview once," she said. "When I was 10. My mom cleaned there. Your wife gave me a bowl of cherries and told me to spit pits in the sink. I thought I'd get in trouble." She laughed. I never forgot it. I swallowed in a way that hurt. Neither did I. The woman squeezed my arm. "Tell your daughter thank you for the bowl." "I will," I said. Across the room, Ava was helping a kid tape a price list to the corner of a table with blue painter's tape because she'd learned aesthetics look better when they work. The next morning I drove to the cemetery. I took a folding chair because my knees had opinions. I sat near Margaret Stone and told her what we'd done, and what we hadn't, and what we'd promised, and what we'd risked. I told her about the Margaret rule, and the washer and dryer, and the bus driver who remembered cherries. I told her our daughter had said the word apology in public. I told her I had used fewer words than usual. When I stood to go, a family passed by. A man my age, a woman with gray hair in a braid, a granddaughter with a backpack full of stickers. The girl moseyed, as kids do in places that feel like libraries. She paused and pointed at the stone next to Margaret's with a bird carved into it. "Why is there a bird?" she asked. "To remember where things can go," the grandmother said. The girl nodded, satisfied, and took the man's hand. They walked on. I stood for a minute longer and watched the wind move through the maple. It leaned a little to the east, like the old tree I'd built the house in once, and I liked the imperfection. It made the sky look earned. On my way back to the truck, my phone buzzed. It was Ava. A photo appeared, 3 women laughing on the school gallery's floor, paint on their hands, one of them holding a bowl I knew too well. The caption read, "Work you can touch." I texted back one word, "More." She sent a heart, then 2 dots, then, "Right kind." When I turned the key, the engine caught, willing and familiar. I rolled down the window, let air that smelled like cut grass and hot stone fill the cab, and eased onto the road, slow and steady. The way you leave a site that will be a building tomorrow and is, today, one more chance to get it right.
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.